There are some NASCAR races that leave you feeling satisfied and others that leave you scratching your head. And then there are races like this one, the kind that give you that strange mix of excitement and frustration all at the same time. You spend the whole day watching things develop, you start to feel like you have a grip on how it is all going to play out, and then in the space of just a few seconds, everything flips completely upside down. That is what happened here, and what made it even more layered than usual is that it was not just one story coming out of this race. There were two separate moments, two very different perspectives, and honestly, two conversations that are going to have NASCAR fans talking for the entire week. Because what happened out on that track did not just shake up the race results, it might actually tell us a lot about where certain drivers are right now, not just in terms of speed or setup, but mentally, emotionally, and in terms of where they are headed as the season keeps moving forward. Before we get into all of it, if you are a real NASCAR fan and you want honest, genuine coverage of this sport every single week, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to NASCAR Nation Report. This channel is brand new, and we are working hard to build something real here. We are pushing toward 15,000 subscribers, and every single one of them matters. This is not a channel built around clickbait or hot takes for the sake of views. It is real fans talking real racing the way it deserves to be talked about. So if that sounds like your kind of community, join us, hit subscribe, and let us get into these two stories. The first story is about Carson Hocevar, and if you were paying attention during the Cookout 400 at Martinsville Speedway, this one probably hurt to watch. Hocevar started the race from 7th position, and from the very beginning he looked competitive. His number 77 Spire Motorsports Chevrolet Camaro had real speed. Not just decent speed for a mid-tier team kind of speed, but genuinely strong pace that had him running inside the top 15 for most of the day, and honestly threatening even better than that at times. The car looked planted and consistent. Hocevar was driving with focus and patience, and it really felt like this could be one of his best results of the season. Everything about his day was pointing in the right direction. And then came the late restart that changed everything. Coming out of Turn 4, Bubba Wallace, driving the number 23 Toyota for 23XI Racing, made contact with the back of Hocevar's car. It was not a gentle tap. It was enough of a hit to completely spin Hocevar around and trigger a chain reaction of destruction. By the time everything settled, 12 cars had been caught up in the wreck. 12! At Martinsville, where the track is so narrow and so tight that there is almost nowhere to go, a wreck like that does not just ruin the day for the drivers directly involved, it scrambles the entire race, reshuffles strategy for everyone, and changes the outcome in ways that ripple through the rest of the afternoon. After the race, Hocevar did not sugarcoat what happened. He said simply that his team got run over, and watching the replay, that description is hard to argue with. He also mentioned that a debris caution earlier in the race had already messed with his team's strategy, so this crash came on top of a day that had already not gone perfectly according to plan. But here's the thing that really stood out about how Hocevar handled the whole situation. Instead of just venting about the contact and the bad luck, he made a point of talking about the speed of his car and how proud he was of what his number 77 team put together for that race. He was not dismissing what happened to him, he just refused to let that be the whole story. He wanted people to understand that this was not a fluke run. This was not a team accidentally finding themselves in a good position. They earned that speed, and they deserved better than what they got. And to back up that point, even after suffering all that damage in a 12-car wreck, Hocevar and his team managed to fix the car well enough to keep him on the lead lap, and he ended up fighting back to finish 17th. That result ties his career best finish at Martinsville. Think about that for a second. After being turned around in a massive wreck, losing track position, and dealing with whatever damage the car sustained, they still came away with one of his best ever finishes at that track. That kind of resilience says a lot about who Carson Hocevar is as a driver and what kind of team he has built around him. He is not just filling a seat, he is building something. And the speed they showed before things went wrong is the kind of thing that should have other teams paying attention. Looking ahead, Hocevar was already talking positively about getting back out there, even mentioning a plan to run in the Truck Series race at Rockingham Speedway during the break before jumping back into the Cup car at Bristol Motor Speedway. That attitude, that willingness to keep racing and keep building instead of dwelling on bad luck is exactly the mindset that turns a promising young driver into a legitimate Cup Series presence. His story coming out of Martinsville is actually a good one, even if it did not feel that way in the moment. Now, the second story is about Bubba Wallace, and this one is more complicated, because on the surface, yes, it is about a crash, it is about a misjudgment on a restart, but when you pull back and look at the bigger picture, it becomes something much more significant than just one bad moment on a short track. Bubba was upfront about what happened. He admitted it was a mistake on his part. He explained that he was already frustrated because he had been put 3 wide going into turn 1 on the restart, which put him in a difficult and uncomfortable position. And trying to make something happen out of that situation, he overdid it coming into the corner and drove into the back of Hocevar. He owned it. He did not try to spin the story or point fingers elsewhere. That honesty is worth acknowledging. But the consequences of that moment are significant, and they go beyond just the crash itself. Before the Martinsville race, Bubba Wallace was sitting 3rd in the Cup Series standings. 3rd. That is a championship-level position. That is the kind of point standing that puts you in a very strong spot heading into the back half of the season and the playoff push. After what happened at Martinsville, he dropped all the way down to 11th. That is not a small slide. That is not a minor setback. That is a massive swing in the point standings caused by one moment of frustration at a critical time in the race. And in a sport where points accumulate slowly and evaporate quickly, that kind of drop is very difficult to recover from in a short period of time. What made the conversation around Wallace's incident even more interesting is that some veteran voices in the sport started weighing in publicly. When people like Rick Mast and Kevin Harvick start offering their perspective on something, it means the moment has taken on a meaning beyond just a routine racing incident. Rick Mast brought up something that is actually pretty profound in the context of modern NASCAR. He pointed to Dale Earnhardt Sr. not as an example of aggressive driving, but as an example of a cerebral approach to racing. Mast's point was that Earnhardt was not just a hard charger who went for everything on every lap. He was smart, he was calculated, he understood when to push and when to hold back, when to take a risk and when to protect what he had. And in today's point system, where consistency over the full year is what gets you into the playoffs and gives you a real shot at a championship, that kind of calculated thinking matters more than it ever has. The message was clear. Bubba needs to develop that ability to manage his emotions in those high-pressure moments, because letting frustration drive your decisions is a recipe for exactly the kind of result that happened at Martinsville. Kevin Harvick added more to the conversation, giving context about how the situation developed. He explained that Bubba had already been put into a tough spot by Hocevar on the restart, and that kind of thing can absolutely get under your skin when you're in the middle of a race and everything is happening at full speed. But Harvick also did not let him off the hook. He was direct about the fact that emotions got the better of Wallace in that moment. And what made Harvick's take particularly interesting is that he also admitted he has done the same thing at Martinsville himself. He has been there. He has lost his temper on that track and made moves that he probably shouldn't have made. He was not speaking from a place of judgment, he was speaking from experience, and that kind of honest reflection from a veteran is actually more valuable than any criticism, because it frames what happened not as a character flaw, but as something that can be learned from and corrected. The reason this whole conversation carries so much weight right now is the timing. Not long ago, NASCAR fans were talking about Bubba Wallace and his 23 1X racing teammate Tyler Reddick sitting first and second in the Cup standings. That is not just good form, that is the kind of early season dominance that makes people start thinking about championships. And now Reddick is still up at the top, building on his lead, while Wallace has slipped to 11th after one incident. That's how quickly this sport can change the story. One wreck, one moment of frustration, one misjudgment on a restart, and suddenly you're no longer talking about a championship contender. You're talking about someone who needs to stabilize and recover before the deficit gets any worse. And the timing could not be more challenging, because after Martinsville and the Easter break, the Cup Series heads straight to Bristol Motor Speedway. If Martinsville tests your patience, Bristol absolutely devours it. The track is even tighter, the banking is extreme, the walls are right there at all times, and the short track intensity is cranked up even further. There is no place on the NASCAR schedule that rewards composure and punishes emotional decision-making more than Bristol. If any leftover frustration from Martinsville is still sitting with Wallace when he pulls into Bristol, that track is going to find it and expose it immediately. Bristol does not give drivers time to settle in and find their footing. Every lap demands your full concentration and your best judgment. One mistake and you are in the wall, or you are wrecking someone else and digging your points hole even deeper. But here is the other side of that coin. If Bubba Wallace comes into Bristol with a clear head, if he uses this difficult moment as the kind of wake-up call that refocuses a driver rather than derails them, then this could actually be exactly the reset that gets him moving back in the right direction. There is a version of this story where the Martinsville incident is the moment he looks back on as the turning point, the race that made him more disciplined and more calculated. Drivers who respond to adversity with focus rather than more frustration are the ones who end up building championship careers. The talent is clearly there. The speed is clearly there. 23X1 Racing showed early in the season that they can compete with anyone. This is not about whether Bubba Wallace is good enough. It is entirely about execution under pressure and managing the mental side of racing at the highest level. When you put both of these stories together, the picture that emerges from the Cookout 400 at Martinsville is actually a really compelling one. On one side, you have Carson Hocevar, a driver who had every reason to be angry and frustrated after being taken out in someone else's wreck, walking away from that race with confidence in his car and pride in his team, already looking forward to the next opportunity. On the other side, you have Bubba Wallace, a driver with real ability and a strong team, walking away from a race with questions surrounding his decision-making and composure at a moment when keeping his head was the most important thing he could do. Both drivers are heading to Bristol. Both of them have something to prove, and for the fans watching, that makes the next race so much more than just another event on the schedule. We are not just watching to see who wins, we are watching to see how these drivers respond. That is the part of NASCAR that keeps fans locked in, even when things go sideways. The results matter, but the responses matter just as much. How a driver handles adversity, how quickly they refocus and come back stronger, how they manage their emotions when the race does not go their way, those are the things that separate good drivers from great ones. And Bristol is about to give both Hocevar and Wallace a chance to answer those questions in one of the most demanding environments in all of motorsports. This is exactly the kind of stuff we break down every week here at NASCAR Nation Report. If you want to be part of a community that follows this sport closely and takes the conversation seriously, please subscribe to this channel. We are a new channel working toward 15,000 subscribers and growing every week. Drop your thoughts in the comments below about the Martinsville race and what you are expecting from both of these drivers at Bristol. And hit that like button if you enjoyed breaking this down together. We'll catch you in the next one.